Well, I got it off of there. I had to come up with this goofy concoction right here, but it worked. And I put that together, and then I hit it with this big hammer, and then I just tapped the base with a brass hammer and it popped right off. Well, as the projects pile up, my need for tools grows, and some I can buy, and some of them I just have to make. One of the most common tasks, and sometimes one of the larger pains in the neck, is literally separating the power head from the lower section of the motor. And one concept really guides the success and failure of that operation typically, and that is picking the motor by the center line of the crankshaft. Okay, big or small, the problem's the same. And I'm more of a Mercury guy than I am Johnson Evinrude. You know, Mercuries are where I cut my teeth. Johnson Evinrude are things I'm moving into as time goes on. One of the cool tools that Mercury has is these really cool, it's a combination puller lifting tool, where basically this threads into the flywheel, and then you put a hook on this and you can pick the power head right off straight up along the center line of the crankshaft like you have to. And Johnson has similar tools as well. I just don't have them. I've got this and things like that, but I didn't have anything for the Johnsons. Now I know this is a little bit dark, but, well, you'll see it in the video. There's bolts that come up from the bottom, right? But there's also one stud that came down from the block, this last one right here. Yeah, this one right here that you had to get to. Now, if you didn't pull the motor or the power head straight, it would tend to rotate about that stud and bind it in this casting right here. Whereas if you pull it along the center line, it came up straight and didn't bind that threaded stud into the casting, which, by the way, is pretty common. Now, I'm a saw shop. I'm not really set up for outboards. And this project right here, we'll get into that later on, is really like the definition of the absolute worst case scenario for trying to take an old outboard and bringing it back to life. But it's also kind of a worst case scenario for me because I just simply don't have the tools to do a lot of the simple stuff. You know, there's a lot of special tools required. Now, while I may have them for chainsaw, because that's my power curve, I'm going to have to invent the wheel a little bit on some of these outboards. So this is a story of one such event. The first event, right? You know, I had to get this darn thing apart because it had fragged a piston. And little did I know at the time, not only did it score the cylinder, which by itself probably should have been a throwaway. There's no money in these, right? But also had tried to push a piece of that busted piston through the side of the block. I just finished getting this back from the weld shop. Now, I've already done a video where I was doing some of the prep, and I'll sort of parse them in over time. But not only did this thing have a cracked block, but it also had a stripped spark plug hole in the head, so I had to get a different head. The crankshaft had some scoring from corrosion, or pitting from corrosion on one of the journals, so I had to get a crank. There's good news and bad news in this story. The good news is I think I have a path forward now. It's been a month, and it's been pretty frustrating. And a lot of it's me relearning some old lessons. And the bad news is just taking a lot of time. And this is the workbench that I have to do work on for chainsaws as well. So I've hadn't to basically lock it up to do this job, because I knew if I took this thing off the workbench it would never go back on, you know. So I've just been slugging my way through it one piece at a time. I almost gave up and got a different block, but then it's like, why am I doing this? So I kind of changed the focus back to trying to take this old motor that had been blown up in the worst possible scenario and bringing it back to life. Now my goal was to try to get this thing running for less than $1,000, because I got it for free. It was a throwaway, like I used to do as a kid. I used to do that as a hobby, where I'd take old outboards and they were alongside the road, people tossed out from, you know, corrosion or being seized or something like that. I'd hammer them apart and make them run. So now an older person, ostensibly smarter, I don't know about that. So here we at it again, going back to my roots. And this was a gift, a funny story I'll tell a different time. And little did I know, this was as close to being a piece of trash as any outboard I have ever worked on. Starting with the blown up piston, broken. I think I'll have a picture in there somewhere, one of the other videos. To the cracked block, to the ruined crank, you know. I had to get new pistons anyway because I was going to bore it 20 thousandths over, and therefore did. But I ended up having to get another connecting rod because, like the crankshaft, it was also pitted. Let me see if I have a picture. Here's the crank that came out of it. You can see that scoring, you know. But I got the crank for like $60. I got a cylinder head for $40. I spent $160 on the new pistons. You know, I got $240 to get it bored and have the pistons fitted to the block. And now I have another $200 into the TIG weld to fix this thing. So it's beginning to creep up there, you know, past $500. So I still have a few dollars to go before I get to the 1,000. But I don't think any of the other 3 cylinders that I have to work on are going to require quite as much effort as this one has. But I guess the point is, if you have the tenacity that even in a case like this, if you have a decent infrastructure of shops around, like the guy who did the boring and the guy who did the TIG, you can fix damn near anything, you know. Mixing with eBay for used parts like this, is it the best crank? No, but it'll work, you know. Kits like this are now available. That's like $60, and that's really a steal. So I'm going to hammer it all apart, which I've done. I'm going to clean it all up, scrape off all the gasket surfaces. The biggest problem I have right now is how do I clean that block, because it has chips all through it. And then we'll start putting it back together. What this video is about is that process of where you start having to innovate and build things in order to get past specific problems on a job like this when you're not set up to do these things. You think that Johnson had problems? Take a look at that one. Think corrosion only happens on outboards? Unreal. One of the jobs, sitting on the floor because I don't have a bench, is to replace a set of cases on that saw right there. Look at that. That would be a victory. Lifted it right off. Very nice. So this was version 1.0. It worked. I think I'm going to find another one of these nuts, you know, and either just take a piece of rebar and make a hook out of it, or pound this out a little bit better than what it is and weld it to the bottom, you know, where I can just spin it on. But for now, we got what we needed. Took it apart. Now, let's get into the heart of this thing. It's in trouble. And I think what I want to do is take the cylinder head off first. And I got that apart. Things are not as good as I would have hoped. So I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to salvage out of this one. But I'm going to come up with a bin for each hole. And the one thing that's interesting about these is these are literally fractured caps. You can see the fracture right there. So these caps have got to go in the right orientation of the connecting rod. But the other thing I'm seeing is this motor was trashed before they even started running it. Look at all the pitting and corrosion in there. It's obviously a motor that had sat for a long time.